This heart surgery was supposed to save a patient's life. Instead, the surgeon died on his own operating table. Dr. Michael Richardson was 18 minutes clinically dead. No pulse, no brain activity. His own medical team performing CPR on their colleague while their patient waited. But when Dr. Richardson came back, he brought something from heaven that would change cardiac surgery forever. A technique so revolutionary that it's now saved over 3,000 lives in 8 years. This is his testimony, and the medical proof will blow your mind. It was March 23rd, 2016, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Michael Richardson, head of pediatric cardiac surgery, was performing what should have been routine surgery on 8-year-old Emma Chen. Emma had been born with a rare heart defect. Multiple surgeries had failed. This was her last chance. Dr. Richardson was the only surgeon in the country with the expertise to attempt this operation. But at exactly 2:47 p.m., while making the initial incision, Dr. Richardson suddenly grabbed his chest and collapsed face first onto the sterile operating table. Massive heart attack in the middle of surgery. The operating room erupted into controlled chaos. Nurse Patricia Williams immediately began CPR, while Dr. Sarah Martinez took over Emma's procedure. But here's what nobody could have predicted. What happened to Dr. Richardson in those 18 minutes he was dead would give medical science a technique from heaven itself. Dr. Richardson later described what happened during his clinical death. And I want you to understand, this man had been a skeptical, science-only surgeon for 25 years. He didn't believe in anything supernatural. He found himself in what he could only describe as a heavenly medical facility. But this wasn't like any hospital he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to glow with soft, healing light. The surgical instruments were made of materials that didn't exist on Earth. They looked like crystallized light that could cut through tissue without causing any trauma. But here's the part that changed everything. Jesus Christ himself was there, dressed as the chief surgeon. Not in robes, but in surgical scrubs that seemed to be made of pure white light. "Michael," Jesus said, "I'm going to show you how we heal hearts in heaven. You're going back, and you're going to use this technique to save thousands of lives." What Jesus showed him next defied every law of cardiac surgery. But before I tell you what Jesus revealed, you need to know what was happening back in the operating room. 18 minutes of CPR. Dr. Richardson's pupils were fixed and dilated. His skin was turning blue. The defibrillator had been used 6 times with no response. Dr. Martinez, still working on 8-year-old Emma, was crying behind her surgical mask. She was about to lose both her patient and her mentor in the same day. The head of the hospital, Dr. William Hayes, arrived and was preparing to call time of death when something impossible happened. Dr. Richardson's eyes suddenly opened. He took a deep breath and said these exact words, "I know how to fix Emma's heart, and it's not the way we've been doing it." He sat up on the operating table, still connected to monitors showing he had just been clinically dead, and said, "Jesus showed me the technique. Move aside." What he did next shocked everyone in that room. Instead of the planned 8-hour invasive surgery, Dr. Richardson asked for something no cardiac surgeon had ever requested: a simple needle, some saline solution, and what he called faith-guided precision. The surgical team thought he was delusional from oxygen deprivation, but Dr. Richardson calmly explained the technique Jesus had shown him. "In heaven's operating room," he said, "they don't cut hearts open. They heal from the inside out using microscopic precision guided by divine knowledge." Using the needle, he made an injection so precise, so perfectly placed, that it triggered Emma's heart to begin repairing itself from within. The technique was called "What Doctor?" Richardson now terms celestial cardiology. Instead of replacing valves, he was somehow stimulating the heart tissue to regenerate. Instead of bypassing blocked arteries, he was causing them to heal and open naturally. The entire surgical team watched in stunned silence as Emma's heart monitors began showing improvement within minutes. Her heart rhythm stabilized, blood flow normalized. The defects that had required major surgery were somehow correcting themselves. Dr. Martinez later testified that she witnessed something that violated every principle of medical science she had learned. But that was just the beginning. Within 3 hours, Emma Chen was awake, alert, and showing no signs of the heart defects she had been born with. The post-surgery scans showed a perfectly healthy heart. But here's what really sent shockwaves through the medical community. Dr. Richardson began using this impossible technique on other patients who had been given days to live, patients that multiple surgeons had declared inoperable, and the success rate was 100%. Not 90%, not 95%, 100%. In 8 years, Dr. Richardson has performed this heavenly technique on over 3,000 patients. Heart defects in newborn babies, massive heart attacks in elderly patients. Conditions that medical textbooks said were impossible to cure. Every single patient survived and was completely healed. The medical establishment initially tried to discredit him. They demanded investigations. They accused him of falsifying records. But when independent medical teams verified the results, when major hospitals started inviting him to demonstrate the technique, when medical journals began documenting the unprecedented outcomes, the skeptics had to admit they were witnessing something beyond human medical knowledge. But the most incredible part of this story is what Dr. Richardson discovered about faith and healing. Dr. Richardson realized that the technique Jesus showed him wasn't just about medical precision. It required what he now calls divine partnership. Before each surgery, he prays over the patient. Not just any prayer, but the specific prayer Jesus taught him in heaven. He places his hands on the patient's chest and asks for heaven's guidance to flow through his hands. And something supernatural happens every time. Other surgeons who have tried to replicate his technique without the prayer element have failed. The technique only works when performed with faith, prayer, and what Dr. Richardson describes as surrendering the surgery to God's hands. This has led to something unprecedented in modern medicine. Entire surgical teams praying before procedures. Hospitals creating prayer rooms adjacent to operating theaters. Medical schools beginning to study the relationship between faith and healing outcomes. Dr. Richardson has now trained over 200 surgeons worldwide in what he calls faith-based precision surgery. Medical missions in Africa, Asia, and South America are using this technique to save lives in places where advanced cardiac equipment isn't available. But perhaps the most powerful testimony comes from the patients themselves. Emma Chen, now 16 years old, is a star athlete with no heart problems whatsoever. She says she remembers seeing angels in the operating room the day Dr. Richardson saved her life. 72-year-old Robert Hayes was given 2 days to live after a massive heart attack. Dr. Richardson performed the heavenly technique, and Robert walked out of the hospital after 3 days with a completely healthy heart. That was 5 years ago. He's now running marathons. Baby Sarah Williams was born with multiple heart defects that should have required 6 major surgeries over her childhood. Dr. Richardson performed 1 procedure using the heaven-taught technique. Sarah, now 4 years old, has a perfect heart. But here's what every patient says about their experience. They all describe feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and divine presence during their surgery. Many report seeing bright lights or feeling the presence of angels. Some, like Emma Chen, specifically remember seeing Jesus standing behind Dr. Richardson during the procedure. And the medical records support every single testimony. Today, Dr. Michael Richardson continues to perform what he calls partnership surgeries with heaven. He's documented over 3,000 successful procedures that conventional medicine said were impossible. He's been featured in medical journals, invited to speak at conferences worldwide, and consulted by hospitals seeking to understand how faith can enhance medical outcomes. But Dr. Richardson says the most important part of his testimony isn't the medical technique. It's the proof that Jesus is actively involved in healing people today. I was the most skeptical person you could meet, he says. I believed only in science, only in what I could see and measure. But dying and meeting Jesus changed everything. Now I know that our best medical knowledge is just scratching the surface of God's healing power. The question Dr. Richardson asks every audience is this: if Jesus can teach surgical techniques that save thousands of lives, what else is he capable of in your situation? 8 years ago, a surgeon died and came back with a cure from heaven. 3,000 lives have been saved because one man was willing to believe that God's knowledge exceeds human understanding. What would happen if you approached your impossible situation with that same faith? If this testimony has impacted you, please subscribe to hear more accounts of God's miraculous interventions in our world today. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that nothing is impossible with God. And remember, the same Jesus who taught Dr. Richardson how to heal hearts is ready to perform miracles in your life too, because heaven's operating room is always open, and the great physician is always on call.